everyone, I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. Chris Everett has some pretty big shoes to fill. He has started work on the follow-up to his award-winning documentary, Wilmington on Fire. His film has taken on even more importance in 2020 with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and calls for racial justice. 5 years now since its release, Wilmington on Fire is still sparking discussions about race relations, not just in Wilmington, but in communities all across the country. And Chris wants part two to spark even more conversations. Chris Everett, director-producer of Wilmington on Fire, the great documentary film. Welcome to the One on One with John Evans podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I know you're a busy man actually shooting Wilmington on Fire 2 now, and I'm going to get to that in a little while. But Chris, it's been 5 years now since you released Wilmington on Fire. The discussion on race relations has really changed a great deal since then. When you were making your film, did you see it as a way to contribute to those discussions, or has it morphed into something that you never thought it would be?
I would say it's a little bit of both. You know, I never thought that the film would really, I guess, catch fire, so to speak, when I first decided to tackle this and to put this film together. You know, I thought that, you know, I would maybe be in a couple of film festivals, you know, local things around North Carolina and Wilmington and from my hometown, Laurinburg. So maybe do some things in Fayetteville, maybe some stuff in South Carolina, Georgia, and that would be it, you know, because I actually had started to go back to college around the time when I started wrapping up the film. So, you know, that was my plan, really, just to get the film out there. Whoever, you know, would want to use it to start these type of discussions, great. But I never thought that, you know, 5 years later that it would really help, you know, really spark a movement, not only throughout the city of Wilmington, but around the country as well.
Are you pleased are you pleased that it's happening, that the discussion is happening again?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, you know, it was a mixture of both. You know, I wanted this film to really be used as a catalyst to start these type of discussions, regardless, you know, of what your background was, what race you were, the age. I wanted all folks to really watch this film and really know the true history of the 1898 massacre, because, you know, we have to know these things and we have to learn from these things. We have to learn from our past mistakes. And that was the big reason why I wanted to do this film, so we can learn from our mistakes of the past so we can move forward for a better future.
Now, when I got here in 1992 and started working here in town, and for, I guess, probably 8 or 9 years, the first decade or so I was here, it was always called the race riot of 1898. Right. Now it's more called the massacre. Mm-hmm. And after seeing your film not once but twice, I really think massacre is a better word, although race riot kind of describes it. But really and truly, when you listen to a lot of the planning that went on, it wasn't just a spark of the moment thing. This thing was planned, so really is more than a riot. Don't you agree?
Oh, totally. I know from other historians who have done a lot of, you know, research on this topic. I think the term race riot, the reason why it was used, because I think that was the term during that time that they kind of called a massacre. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, you know, I kind of see why they kind of use that term, race riot. But, you know, we're in a new day now, and it needs to be properly, you know, called what it was, and it was a massacre. Also, people have used the term coup d'etat as well, right, which is also right. You know, the violent overthrow of an existing government. Right. And that's what happened on November 10th, 1898 in Wilmington.
But it fascinates me how the language has changed, how the terminology for the day has changed. I've read a lot of interviews that you've done and actually watched a couple on YouTube, but I want you to take me back to the day that you took the biggest step in this process. And I know, because I want to get into it, that you had a relative in Wilmington and you learned about the history of it. What made you do that? Was there one specific day, one specific event?
I would say the day and the event that had happened when I decided to especially do Wilmington on Fire specifically was I was living in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was October the 10th, 2010. That was the day I was laid off from my job in Atlanta. And I had already started to come up with this idea of a film called Wilmington on Fire. But, I was living in Atlanta and I said, you know what, I'll get to this whenever I can get to it. But October 10th, 2010 is the day I got laid off. And from that day forward, that day, I said, you know what, I'm gonna move back to North Carolina. I have this cool concept of doing this documentary on the Wilmington Massacre called Wilmington on Fire. Finally, I had a title and everything. And so I called my grandparents up, said, hey, got laid off from my job. I'm moving back to Laurinburg. I'm going to try to tackle this documentary project that I've been dying to do for the past couple of years. I'm going to do this. And that was the day, that I decided to leave Georgia, come back to my hometown of Laurinburg, North Carolina, where I, literally wanted to leave my whole life, because it's a small rural town, nothing there, but decided, you know what, let me focus and really buckle down on doing this documentary, because being in Atlanta and these bigger cities, it's too many distractions, and I said, you know what, I need to focus and I need to be close to Wilmington also. Laurinburg's about an hour and a half from Wilmington, straight on 74. So, I can be in a smaller setting, save a lot of money, so I can focus on doing this, and I can still come to Wilmington whenever I like as well to do what I need to do for the film. So that was it. October the 10th, 2010 is when I made that decision to do Wilmington on Fire.
And so the dominoes just fell. The process of doing it all, though, you had a relative, if I'm correct, who was a nurse who was actually here in Wilmington, right?
Right. Yeah. As a kid, my uncle, he lived in Wilmington for a while. He was an RN. So, he traveled around to different cities, different states, throughout his life as an RN. And, he would go to wherever he would go to, whatever town or city, he would always, study the local history. And he would talk about it when me and my grandparents used to visit him. We would come visit him maybe once or twice a month. It's only an hour and a half from Laurinburg, so it wasn't no big deal. But he would talk about, the local history in 1898. So that always stuck with me as a kid. And then as I got older and, went to college and stuff like that, they would briefly talk about 1898. And I was like, wow, that's the stuff that my uncle was telling me about as a kid. And as I got older and decided to do a documentary and wanted to just start making my own films and own documentaries, I said, you know what? I want to do something about the 1898 massacre. We have Rosewood, that John Singleton did back in 1997, 96. And you've had a lot of books about the Tulsa massacre, the Tulsa riots and stuff like that, the Red Summer, 1919. But no one's done a feature-length documentary on this type of event in my home state of North Carolina. So right then and there, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Started doing research and started reaching out to people, and the rest is history.
And I've read you said it took pretty much 5 years from that date from that October 10th. It took 5 years from from the time you actually did that till the time you said, okay, we're done. Right?
Yeah, it was a long journey. Like I said, I got laid off, and then the following year, from I guess the layoff period to the following November 2011 was a lot of research, planning, getting crew together, seeing what would fit, what wouldn't work. And the end of the film, the poem part that you see of Larry Renee Thomas, that was actually the first thing we shot for the film. That was November 2011.
And that's pretty powerful, just words. I mean, there's nothing but his mouth and his face and the words. And
let me tell you something about that though. That wasn't the plan. I tell people about this all the time, is that the plan was, it's his poem, right? And he was supposed to memorize it. And it was going to be a straight, shot of him saying the poem with mix and match of the archival photos. But he didn't memorize it. So I'm like, oh man, what are we going to do? I can't just have him just look and then keep looking down on the paper. So I said, you know what, we had to improvise. So I said, let's shoot close on his mouth so people can just see his mouth. We don't know who it is, and cut with the archival material, and then the last line he just looks in the camera, and it
Yeah.
works.
And
So that wasn't the original plan.
The expression said it all, really. You know, the expression was kind of this happened. This is a fact. You can't change it.
Right.
And it really was a powerful way to end the film.
Yeah. And originally it was supposed to be the beginning of the film. Like I said, when you're doing documentaries, you know, you never really stick to the script, because something that looks good on paper, when you start getting into the editing system and you start piecing things just don't flow well. So it actually worked better at the end. But the original plan and the original outline and treatment was to have that be at the beginning of the film. But once we started editing, it just felt like it needed to really be a piece to close out the story.
What was the last thing you did? Do you remember the day that you put the finishing touches on it?
What, shooting or just editing?
The whole process.
Oh, I would say it was about, when was it? I'd say about the end of July 2015. And, you know, we shot everything. We pretty much got everything that we needed shot, interviews, the whole nine. I would say it was the summer of 2014.
Okay.
And it took another year to get post-production funds together. But luckily, you know, out the blue, an NBA player reached out to me, David West. He's a retired NBA player. People are familiar with him from the Golden State Warriors' last 2 championship runs. He was on that team, but he reached out. He actually wanted to get a DVD of the film. He thought that the film was done. He was actually following me for a couple of years. And I said, well, the film's not done yet, but when it's done, I'll let you know. He said, well, how much do you need to get this thing done? Because I think this story is very important. I want to see the film.
Yeah.
And I would love to, you know, I said, well, you know, it's this amount. And he said, well, let's talk. You know, I would love to partner with you to get this thing out. And that's how we were able to get the post-production funds. You know, the film was almost done. I just had to pay for the coloring and the editing and graphics and all that stuff, the scoring. And so once we did that, it was the end of July. Cucalores was around the corner. We submitted, and you know, we debuted November in 2015, and we actually set the Cucalores record for most attended screening ever in the history of the
festival.
Still stands. Hopefully, you know, part 2 will break that.
And it's won tons of awards. You know, I mean, it won it at Cucalores, it won it at the North Carolina Black Film Festival. You yourself won Best Director at a festival in 2017. When you submit these things, and I've submitted stories for different competitions, and I know the feeling of what it's like when you get that notoriety and when you get that feedback. But tell me what it was like for you, because I read a quote that you said, I'm from a small town in North Carolina. I never thought that people would care about my work. These are your words here now. I never thought that my work would be impactful at all. This film changed my life. Take me back to that first award that it won, the second award, the director's award. What it was like for somebody to have the mindset that you did to all of a sudden people said, great job, Chris.
Well, I would say I would take it not just to the first award. I would say for the premiere for Cucalores. You know, like I said, I had low expectations. You know, I thought like maybe 100 people. I would say 200 people at the max would come see the film because it's local history. You know, but I didn't realize we were going to just pack up Thalian Hall and then have about 300 people on the outside that couldn't get in. And that was my first screening ever. You know, a lot of times people have their first premieres and maybe 50 people, 100 people max. But I'm
most of them are family members, you know,
Exactly. And crew and cast, you know. So this is my first Q&A and everything. It's my first time speaking in front of a crowd, 600 people looking at me. And I was so nervous. I was, chopping up my words, and oh man, it was a nerve-wracking experience, but it was cool and great, especially afterwards. You know how it is at Cucalores, you're hanging out, meeting with other filmmakers and people just coming up to you, appreciating the work. And it just kind of grew from there. And then when I won my first, couple of awards, just getting those and just that feeling, like this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I really found my true passion. It takes people a while to really find out what they're good at. And it's a lot of trial and error, But I was like, wow, this is really what I'm good at, and I really enjoy it as well. Let me keep going with this. And so I just submitted to more festivals, kept doing my own screenings as well at different colleges
Right.
and universities. And 5 years later, the film still, we still screen the film to this day, like 2 to 4 times a month, even during COVID.
That's really awesome. Now, what did you see yourself? I know you grew up in Laurinburg,
Yeah.
and again, you said I'm from a small town. I never knew my work would be as impactful. But what did Chris see himself doing when you were in high school?
Oh, well, in high school, I didn't really see myself doing much because in especially rural America, football is king.
Right.
If you're not playing high school football or, it's like there's nothing else, so I really wasn't into sports like that. I would do it just recreationally, but, not trying to really play sports to go to college or be a professional athlete. So, I always was creative, and I could draw, and I love design and graphics. So I said, you know what, let me go to school for graphic arts. Originally, I was going to go to the military. I was very interested going to the Army, and decided not to do that and instead go to King's College in Charlotte, North Carolina,
Right.
study graphic arts. So that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to be like a big graphic designer, maybe start my own little ad agency. That was the goal. But I started, dibbling and dabbling into acting and modeling and stuff like that, and decided, hey, I want to do this somewhat, whether it's in front of the camera or behind it. Let me just start exploring, but also use my advertising and marketing and graphic design expertise to help promote, these films and things that I'm getting involved in. So, going to school for graphics and learning advertising and marketing actually helped me later on to
Right.
grow an
Yeah.
audience
Yep.
and stuff like that.
Especially
So
with independent documentary,
exactly.
you got to do all that work yourself.
Exactly. So it was good training and good prep work, for, eventually when I found out what I really wanted to do. So glad I actually took this route. You don't really realize it until, down the road, like, man, this is the right path I should have went on in the first place. So it all worked out.
It's great to talk to a fellow King's College graduate.
Yeah.
You happen to go to the one in North Carolina. I went to the one in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Oh, man.
Also a small little school, King's College. Yeah. But when I read that you went to King's College, I was like, nope, different one. North Carolina version, not the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania version. What about your family? You talk a lot about your grandparents. Were they instrumental? Was your family instrumental in urging you to do this? Were they always right there helping Chris along?
Oh yeah, my grandmother, she always thought that I could do this type of stuff, this type of creative work. She always pushed that on me, even though I wasn't confident in myself, because like I said, growing up in a rural town, you don't see folks that they're doing this type of stuff. You don't see people making movies or being involved in the entertainment industry or even having a business,
right.
Let alone. So, it was very hard for me to really believe in that until I left Laurinburg and started doing it, and then came back and started doing it as well. So, my grandparents always were supportive, and my grandfather always, preached about, hard work and, just going all out for it, not making any excuses. So even when making this film, even though I didn't have a lot of money or no budget, I said, you know what, I can still make a way out of no way. I just got to work hard and just align myself with the right people, and we can make this thing happen.
Well, and
yeah.
You did a lot of the same thing that I did, because I grew up in a small town too, 2,500 people, one stoplight. It was a four-way, but we had a stoplight. But, when I first got into this business, I kept going back after I had an internship. I kept going back to the TV station for nothing, just so I could stay around and stick around and learn more, so that maybe when there was an opening, I might get it. And from what I understand, you did the same thing, working for nothing and going back and just learning. And where was that happening?
Oh yeah, when I went to college and graduated, I wanted to get more involved in film. So I would just, when I would see people doing like student film projects or little small independent low budget projects, I would just hit them up, because Craigslist was real big back then to promote, like if you had like an audition or you're looking for crew for your independent project. So I would hit them up, say, hey, can I come and work for free? I'll do whatever, get coffee,
Right.
pick up the camera,
But you're learning.
whatever. Exactly. So, those are the things that I did. In Charlotte, then when I moved to Atlanta, I did the same thing. And then, so when I was ready to make the move to do my own films, I said, you know what? There's still things I need to learn. Let me get a mentor. So I reached out to an individual. I was a fan of his work. His name's Pete Chapman.
Hmm.
He's a big time TV director now. He's actually married to what's her name, Kelly McCreary from Grey's Anatomy. She's
Yeah.
one of the actresses. Yeah, that's his wife. They recently got married. But Pete Chapman actually executive produced Wilmington on Fire. He was one of the first people I reached out to because I was a fan of his work. He did an excellent film back in 2006 called Premium with Zoe Saldana in it, and Hill Harper and Dorian Messick. And then he also did an excellent documentary about the 761st Black Tank Battalion in World War II. And so I had both films. I was a fan, and I reached out. He was teaching at NYU at the time. I said, "Hey, Pete, I'm a fan of your work. I got both your films. I've been following you. I'm looking for like an executive producer. You don't have to do a lot. Just someone to kind of mentor me and just say, hey, Chris, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this right. Someone that could look at some of my footage and just tell me, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing right?" And so he did that. He hit me up like a week later. And, he wanted to get involved, with the project. And so he's still a mentor to this day, someone that I can reach out to and, get advice from, career advice and everything,
And now
about this business.
And now the shoe's on the other foot now. You're
Right.
mid-30s now, have had some success.
Right.
So what do you tell those young students who send emails to Chris Everett or to send emails to Speller Street Films and say, look, I want to do this, I have an idea. Do you make it a point to try to encourage them as well and maybe mentor some younger ones?
Oh yeah. I do it all the time, and I can only, you can only do what you can because,
I understand. Yeah.
When I first was starting out, I had a lot of open free time in the world. Now that time is very limited, but during this time, I know I helped produce a few other people's projects. I would say one I executive produced and mentored was a guy by the name of Ricky Kelly. He has an excellent documentary called Black Beach, White Beach, a tale of two beaches, and it's on Amazon Prime right now if you want to check it out. But it's
So
about
is
the
Wilmington
two
on
bike
Fire. Plug for Wilmington on Fire, Amazon Prime.
Yeah, Wilmington on Fire is on there as well. But Black Beach, White Beach is about the two bike weeks that go on in Myrtle Beach. You have the Harley Davidson one, and then you have the one after that during Memorial Day weekend, which is Black Bike Week. And it's about those two bike weeks and also the history behind Black Bike Week. A lot of people don't understand the history and why it was started. People just look at it as going down to party and do that and ride bikes, but it's more to it than that. And so when he approached me, I was like, man, this is a great story because I always would go down to Black Bike Week. Like Laurinburg is close to Myrtle Beach as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is a cool story. And so we would, talk and he wanted me to come on executive producer and mentor him. So I did. And he premiered a few years ago. I think it was like 2018 at the Cucalores Film Festival. He ended up getting the first ever distribution deal out of Cucalores. Gravitas Ventures was at the festival. They loved the atmosphere that he brought to it. It sold out, and they offered him a distribution deal on the spot. So
Love
that was yeah.
Love
so,
Cucalores. Done some stuff with those
yeah.
folks for years, and it's just such a great event and a great launching pad for the next generation of filmmakers. You had to do a lot of research with this whole process, Chris. I know you, because just going through it and seeing some of the archival stuff that you have, as you were doing that research, was there a real wow moment that you learned something you didn't know about the whole process? Like a holy crap, they did this moment?
I would say just how organized, this event was. Because a lot of times, when you're researching stuff or you're reading books or just seeing articles that kind of feature, the Wilmington Massacre or Tulsa, they make it seem like, it was just a small group of individuals and it just happened. But no, just how calculating, organized this was, for years in the planning of it. That's what really was the wow factor to me, and just how it was a statewide movement of white supremacy. Also, even in my hometown of Laurinburg, because in the film, we talk about the group called the Red Shirts that were, terrorizing African Americans back then. It was similar to the Klan, but without, a mask over their faces. But so when I was researching, found out that a lot of the photos that you can find right now of red shirts that are in even existence are photos of red shirts from my hometown of Laurinburg. So
Wow.
those photos of the red shirts that are in my film, Wilmington on Fire, those those are red shirts from Laurinburg, my hometown. And so
Wow.
that really, yeah, so that really showed me that this thing was just bigger than Wilmington. This was a whole statewide movement. And I think that was the biggest thing that really wowed me, was like, wow, this thing
Yeah,
was
I'm still
a
wowing
mass
right now.
movement.
That's an
Exactly.
amazing, but it goes to show you that, to me anyway, that you were really meant to do this.
Yeah.
That everything kind of fell in line for you to do this. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, your film has a lot of key characters, but I think the fact that you found the two direct descendants, Dr. Manley and Faye Chaplin,
Yeah.
I think it gave it a personal context
Right.
to make it different than just a history lesson, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It gave that personal touch to it, that these families were touched by this. It's not just something that you're going to read in a history book. Like, there's blood and flesh that are still being impacted by this 122 years later.
Right. Right. Definitely. And that's why I wanted to do the film in that way. I gotta again give a huge thank you to Larry Rennie Thomas. Because he is the one that connected me with Dr. Manley and Faye Chaplin. Because Larry, he has an organization that actually seeks out and finds direct descendants of the 1898 massacre in order, to help build a case for reparations for them. So Larry was the first person who I even reached out to when I wanted to put this thing together. And he kind of guided me along in the process, because he's worked with countless of individuals since the 1980s about 1898. And he was really one of the only voices for a long time that was really pushing about knowing about the 1898 massacre and pushing, this history out. And so he already had a relationship with Miss Faye Chaplin and Dr. Lewin Manley, and he got me in contact with them. And they wanted to be involved because they were actually waiting on someone to do a project like this. They had all
Really?
this information, yeah. And so they were all willing to whatever, any type of archival material I needed. Whenever I wanted to do an interview, they're like, "Hey, Chris, just let us know and we'll do it." Because this is something we've been waiting to do, for a while now.
Now, you got them to be a part of it, and one thing I thought I'd ask you about was, did you think as part of this to ever reach out to maybe descendants of those who were on the other side? To the, Attorney McCoy, William McCoy's family, or Waddell, or Keenan. Did you think about, or maybe you did, and explain whether that ever crossed your mind?
It did. It crossed my mind. But the reason why I didn't, it was because I know back in like 2006 to 2008, there was a lot of talk about 1898. They came out with the official state report.
Right.
By Larry Unfleet. They were doing a lot of, town hall meetings in Wilmington and things like that, organizing. Charlotte Observer did a huge story on it that interviewed, some of those descendants from the actual conspirators of the 1898 massacre. News and Observer did a big, huge insert spread on it. But the thing is, we kept hearing that side of it. We kept seeing, those individuals. I wanted to do a different spin on it. I wanted folks like Dr. Manley and Faye and people like Larry as well, who's been on this fight, like I said, since the 80s.
And Kent as well, who's done all the research, yeah.
Exactly. So, and also Professor Sandy Darity as well for the economic impact. So I wanted to do something a little different. I said, you know what, we've heard from the other side, really since the massacre happened, so let's hear from the opposite side and see what we can do with it.
And I have to tell you that there is the plaque in downtown Wilmington to Dr. Manley.
Yes.
Or Mr. Manley, rather.
Yeah, his grandfather.
Yeah. And after I saw your film, I looked at that differently because I had a face to put with the name and a story to put with that name. I may have passed that in the 28 years I've been here a couple of hundred times, never gave it a second thought. But after seeing the film and then seeing that, it made me stop. And it made me think back to that person who was remembered with that marker downtown.
Yeah, and I get that a lot from folks, even folks who have came to Wilmington over the years. And once they saw the film, they'll hit me up and say, "Chris, I'm going back to Wilmington just to check out some of those places downtown that you talked about in your film, and some of these markers and the 1898 park, and visit." So they're looking at different. They're looking at Wilmington totally different now. Even I started looking at it differently. When I was coming to film and researching and stuff, and you don't look at it the same way after you
No,
watch the film.
no, you don't.
Yeah, so a
You
lot
can't,
of people have
you
said
can't
it to
even
me.
drive down
Exactly.
the areas down there anymore
Exactly.
without having that in the back of your mind.
Right.
Did you get a lot of pushback against doing it? Did anything ever almost cause you to stop?
Honestly, I never really got any pushback at all from people when I was doing this thing. The only thing that almost caused me to stop was just the lack of money, putting this thing together. That was the only thing. I think people thought that, oh, this is just a person talking about 1898 again, because there have been several individuals over the years who have talked about doing something like this, doing a documentary, or doing a film on the 1898 massacre. Either they just talked about it and didn't happen, or they started it and just never finished it.
Right.
So I guess people kind of put me in that category of like, this is just somebody's talking about 1898. They're not going to do nothing. Oh, well, he's not doing nothing. So I was able to kind of go under the radar, so to speak, and just do what I had to do, and just continue to let people know, hey, it's coming. It's coming. Just give me time. This is a film. It's a process. So that was really the only type of setbacks that were happening, was just that the money aspect of trying to get this thing together. And that was pretty much it. And once we put it out there,
Once David West came in, it really kind of gave you that extra step and boost. You're a filmmaker. You've done a lot of research here, so you're an expert on this. You're also from North Carolina.
Yeah.
What's fair as far as reparations go for the descendants of those of the Dr. Manleys, of the Fay chaplains? What's fair in your mind as far as reparations are concerned?
Well, I'm not a reparations expert.
I understand, but you're an expert on the impact of what it's done to these families, and that's what I meant as far as expert.
Okay. Well, I would say definitely, just on my opinion alone, and just looking at the impact, financial compensation, I think is definitely in order. I know years ago, back in 2006 to 2008, when they had the Race Riot Commission, the Wilmington Race Riot Commission, they actually presented some bills to go to the General Assembly. All that stuff got knocked down, but it was a great series of bills. One was to actually financially compensate direct descendants who could prove losses, like Faye Chaplin, like Dr. Lewin Manley. Also, to create 2 Black business incubators and districts in Wilmington, the Castle Street area and also the 4th Street North Side area as well, to try to grow Black business, Black entrepreneurship, and Black home ownership in these impacted areas, in the Black communities. Also to have this history taught in K through 12 schools throughout North Carolina. Also give a film production company $500,000 to do what I did.
Well, wish you would have had that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I still, we're doing part 2, so they hear me out here, help us out. But so it was, these were all good reparation bills, and none of the stuff got passed at all. Not even the putting it in schools, at least, to teach. So, I think bringing those type of bills back to the table would be key. But I think at the end of the day, when it's the actual direct descendants, because you have some direct descendants that live here in Wilmington today still. Yeah. And I really think they would have to make that decision for just them as the direct descendants personally of what they would want. But as the African-American community as a whole in Wilmington, I think, grants and business grants, business loan opportunities, home grants, home loan opportunities are definitely in order. But when it's specific direct descendants, I think that's really up to them to really come together and create their own type of thing and say, hey, this is what we want specifically for our family and our family legacy.
Do you think the fusion moment can happen again in this country, in this city, in this country?
I think it is. I think it is happening. I think Reverend Barber, he's been leading that charge, for a few years now. of really trying to create that new fusion movement, taking it back to 1897. And I see it happening now, even in Wilmington, for the past, I say, about a couple of years, year and a half now. And you can kind of see it just with this, recent election, that Wilmington is trying to become, that it's really trying to get back to that 1897 spirit. It's going to take a while to get fully back there, but I do see steps of it, coming back towards it. So it's going to take a while to get there, but at least it's starting and people are trying to do something like that again.
Okay, I'm going to get you to take your director hat off and put your personal Chris Everett hat on.
All right.
Who's the biggest wow person you've met through this whole process? Somebody that you were just flabbergasted, talked to you, reached out to you, said congratulations. Who's the biggest one that really kind of shocked you?
Oh, it's two. Actually, it's two. And I guess it covers Wilmington on Fire and now Wilmington on Fire 2. I would say the first person was Hillary Burton Morgan from One Tree Hill.
Yes.
They shot One Tree Hill back in the day. So that was the first person. She actually, it was over the summer. She actually tagged me on Instagram. I think someone told her about the film and told her to watch it. And she watched it, loved the film, and shouted me out on Instagram, because I got on Instagram one day and saw that 200 people started following me. I was like, who are these people following me? So I scrolled down. I was like, why is Hillary Burton tagging me for? So I went to her page, on the video, and, she gave me a shout out and urged everyone to watch the film. And so I hit her up. I sent her a message. I said, hey, thank you. I really appreciate the support. I'm a fan of your husband as well, being on The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. Thanks. And she hit me back and we just started chatting.
Nice.
And I told her, I'm working on part 2. We had to slow down because of COVID-19, but I'm about to get it going again. And she said, hey, I would love to help you out with it. And so she came on board to executive produce Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2 right now.
Nice.
And then the second person was Peyton Reed. Peyton Reed's a big Hollywood producer. He's directed the last 2 Ant-Man movies for Marvel. Mm-hmm. He's doing a lot of stuff with Disney Plus, like The Mandalorian and stuff like that. He actually started sharing a lot of the Wilmington on Fire stuff, and he also contributed to my my crowdfunding campaign a few months ago as well. And found out he's from Raleigh. So I think those 2 folks have really just been the biggest, because they're Hollywood, and I felt like just being, like I said, from Laurinburg or from a small town, that I would never even be able to reach folks like that, on their radar. And so it shows that people are watching, no matter how big you are or how small you are. If you're doing something impactful and the work is real, genuine and true, people will follow you and watch you and also support you as well.
Well, I watched it again this week on Amazon Prime, and my wife and my daughter, because we had to buy it to watch it. And my wife and my daughter watched it, and it got me to thinking, how have the streaming services really kind of made a difference for filmmakers like you? Because before, I might have had to go to a store or to the library and get the DVD version, but now it's on Amazon Prime. You can get it obviously in libraries and stuff, but what do streaming services like that mean to a filmmaker like Chris Everett?
It means a lot. It means a lot. Streaming services still have a long way to go, because a lot of times, the filmmakers, we still kind of get pennies, on the dime. But still, but it really opens the door for a lot of folks to watch. Like I said, that's how Peyton Reed even found out about the film. He saw it on Amazon. Yeah. So 20 years ago, that wouldn't even happen. I would have to be in LA somewhere and maybe could handle my DVD, and maybe he might watch it. But you never know who's watching. Everyone has Amazon. Everyone has these different streaming platforms. And especially when, the pandemic was real big and it was just locked down everywhere, and all people had was Netflix, Amazon. And that's when we saw a spike as well during the whole lockdown period, when COVID was rampant and we couldn't go anywhere but just watch Amazon and Netflix. We saw an increase of viewership as well. So that was really key. And it still is key for filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, because we're able to reach more folks, not only just throughout the country, but throughout the world as well.
All right, tell me about part two. We've talked about it a little bit here. How difficult was it to decide which way you were going to go with the second part?
Well, the reason why I wanted to always do a follow-up to the first one was because whenever I would show the film outside of Wilmington, folks would just make it seem like, people in Wilmington aren't doing anything. The massacre happened and just people are just here not doing nothing. I said, no, that's not true at all. I've made great relationships with folks over the years. I actually, married my girlfriend, met my girlfriend when I first started doing Wilmington on Fire. And we just recently got married.
Well, congratulations.
A few months ago. Thank you. So it's some great people here that are doing some amazing things. It's just not getting talked about or highlighted. So I said, you know what? I think it'd be cool to do chapter 2, the final chapter, to really make this story full circle. We know the history in the past. Now let's look at the present and see how people are trying to bring Wilmington back, to that fusion period, to that period of 1897, and the work they're doing around that to do that. And I said, you know what, that's what I want to do. And those are the stories. That's the story I want to tell, to really give this story and history just a full, complete circle, so people can see that, okay, this happened in Wilmington, but look how not only the African-American community is rising up, but just the city of Wilmington as well as a whole is trying to rise up as well, to really become that city that it was destined to be, in 1897.
Or
so
could have been had this not happened in 1898 on November the 10th. What's your time frame? Do you have a guesstimate? I know the first one probably took a lot longer than this one will, because now you've got a little more knowledge of the whole process. Right. But what is your time frame maybe to get it out there again?
Hopefully, and it all depends on the pandemic, but hopefully next November 2021, that's the goal. Hopefully we can make that date. Possibly premiere at Cucalores again, give it another round, second time around. Yeah. But you never know. But the tentative date is November 2021. Hopefully nothing doesn't, hopefully nothing doesn't affect that date, but we'll see. But that's the goal for right now, November 2021.
Well, this has been a blast, Chris. I appreciate you taking the time. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, it really is a good watch. And I mean that, you sit back at the end of it and you say, wow, that happened here.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest shock to my system, was learning how in-depth it was. Because, admittedly, I didn't know how in-depth this whole planning thing was leading up to the date. I thought it was just something that happened, but no, this was planned long before November the 10th, 1898. And kudos to you. All the successes is well deserved, and we just wish you the very best as you move forward with part 2.
Thank you. And also, I'd just like to say these quick little words. Again, thank you for the support. Watch Wilmington on Fire on Amazon Prime. Watch it over the holidays with your family. And if you're really into history, also check it out. Also, I just recently won a Doc Fellowship Award from Firelight Media. Firelight Media is a real big documentary organization founded by Stanley Nelson. Yeah. And I just got a Doc Lab Fellowship for my next film that I started working on right after the first Wilmington on Fire, called Grand Master. It's a martial arts documentary, and it's about martial arts pioneer Grand Master Vic Moore, who lives actually right across the bridge in Delco right now. So that's the other film that I'm actually kind of doing at the same time while I'm doing Wilmington on Fire too. So I've been filming the Grand Master documentary for about 2.5 years now. And so being involved in Firelight now is really going to help with that film and really help me complete it as well. So definitely be on the lookout for that one also.
Well, here's hope you find a 25th and a 26th hour in the day, because it sounds to me like your schedule's pretty busy.
Oh, yeah, it's really busy.
All right, Chris, we wish you all the best. Appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Thank you.
A big thank you to Chris Everett for taking time from his busy schedule to join us for this week's podcast interview. You can read more about Wilmington on Fire at the movie site. It's wilmingtononfire.com. Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2 already has a page on Facebook. You can find out details there. And his account on Twitter is Wilmington1898. You can also reach out to Chris at a couple of other places. Speller Street Films is his company, and he's the communications manager for the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival, too. Now, before we go, I'd like to ask you a favor. Please download and subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast on whatever app you use to listen to your favorite shows. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a rating or a review. The more feedback we have from people like you, the higher we'll be listed on those apps, and the better chance we'll have of bringing in even more new listeners. I'm John Evans. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's episode of One-on-One. Stay safe.